All right, in this video, we are going to talk about the various forms of an equation of a line. So there's a couple ones that we're going to talk about, but the first one that we're going to talk about is called the slope-intercept form of a line, and that is of when the line is of the form y equals mx plus b. So when you have an equation of a line written exactly in this format, then the number with the x is the slope, right? And the y-intercept is the number b, or likewise, if you're thinking of that as an ordered pair, 0b. Okay? So that's very helpful. If you know the slope and you know the intercept, then you can immediately find an equation of a line. So, for instance, if we were given a line has, say, slope 7 and a y-intercept of 0, 6, let's say, well, then it's very, very easy to get the equation of the line. All right, the equation, right, the slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope, right? And so that would be 7 in this case. And the y-intercept would be 6, right? So b would be 6. All right, so the equation for that line would be y equals 7x plus 6. And if you went over here and graphed it, right, you can see that the line would look like this. All right, so there's the graph of the line. And you can see that there's the intercept, the y-intercept here, at 0, 6. And if you look at the slope, right, the slope is 7. So if you went over 1 and then up 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right, you would find another point on the line there. So 1, 13, okay? All right, so given the slope and the intercept, it's very easy to find an equation of a line using the slope-intercept form. Okay, another useful thing about the slope-intercept form is if you're given a line in some other format. So over here I have 3x plus 2y equals 8. And if you're asked to find the slope and the intercept of that line, right, what you would do is put it into the slope-intercept form, okay? And then once you have the line in the slope-intercept form, then you can just read off the slope and the intercept. So that is a useful thing to do sometimes. All right, so let's take a look at an example. We want to find the slope and the y-intercept of the line 3x plus 2y equals 8. All right, so 3x plus 2y equals 8. And so what you would want to do, right, to put a line in slope-intercept form, you would solve for y, right? So the first thing I'm going to do, since both sides are as simple as I can get them, right, I want to get all of the y's on one side, all of the terms without the y on the other side. So the easiest way to accomplish that, right, would be to subtract 3x from both sides. All right, so I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides. That would mean over on the left side, I would have 2y. And over on the right-hand side, I would have minus 3x plus 8. All right, I am writing the minus 3x out in front and plus 8. It's a little bit easier rather than to write 8 minus 3x, although you can do that. But what I'm trying to do is just match the slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b, as much as possible, okay? All right, and then the next thing that I have to do to solve for y is to divide both sides by 2. And so that will certainly work, right? But when I do that, I'm just going to write it over to the side. If I divide both sides by 2, which normally, you know, is perfectly legitimate thing to do, right? I would do that, and then on the left side, those 2's would cancel, right? 2 goes into itself once. It goes into 2 once as well, right? So 1 divided by 1 is 1. So I have 1y, which I'll just write as y. And then I have minus 3x plus 8 over 2. So normally, that would be perfectly fine. If the problem was just, hey, solve for y, then you could do that, and there you go, it's solved for y. But really, the problem here is about determining the slope and the y-intercept. So if you look at the y-intercept form up here, slope-intercept form, right? It's not a big fraction. It doesn't have this big fraction in here, so it makes it harder to read off the slope and the intercept when you do that, okay? So what you want to do is divide every term by 2. That makes it a little easier, and that's equivalent to dividing both sides by 2. All right, so when you're putting a line in slope-intercept form, it's good to remember divide every term by 2 rather than both sides. All right, and so that will get it into this format more quickly if you remember to do that. Over on the left-hand side, those 2's cancel each other out, and so I'm left with y. The minus 3x over 2, I'm going to write as minus 3 over 2 times x, which is exactly the same as this, and I'll show you that in a second. And then 8 divided by 2 is 4, right? Okay. And so now you can see this format matches the slope-intercept form exactly, right? It's y equals some number times x plus another number, right? That matches exactly. And so now that we have it in the slope-intercept form, we can read that off. The slope of this line would be negative 3/2, and the y-intercept would be 4, or if they want it in the point form, it would be 0, 4. Okay. All right, and again, we can graph this out and take a look at it. 3x plus 2y equals 8. Okay. And so we can see, hey, sure enough, right, the y-intercept is 0, 4. And then the slope, right, if I count down, let's see if I can get those numbers in there a little bit better, right? If I look at this point and go down 1, 2, 3, so minus 3, and over 2, right, the change in y would be minus 3. The change in x would be positive 2, right? And so that's the slope of this line. So sure enough, it works out that way. Okay, last thing on this example is I said that minus 3x over 2 is the same as minus 3/2 x. Sometimes that's confusing to people. So what you would do is just pull this apart, like so. All right, this minus 3x over 2 can be written as minus 3 over 2 times x over 1, right? And why is that? Well, just think about how do you multiply fractions. You just multiply the tops and multiply the bottoms, right? And so that's actually the easier operation for, or the easiest one, right, for fractions. And so if I multiply the tops, minus 3 times x, I get minus 3x. If I multiply the bottom, 2 times 1 is 2. So you can see these are this comes out exactly the same as that. And then anything over 1 is just itself, right? And so we can write this as minus 3/2, and whatever x is, when you divide it by 1, it's just going to be x. So you can write it as just x like that. Okay? So that's the reason why these two are exactly the same. Okay, so that's the slope-intercept form.